When you call now.
Nike U.S. Cup matchup. Here's a few things.
We train in peacetime, so we're prepared.
Sino que hay alguien en control. ¿Qué información?
In world history. And
is that there's another building that's about to come down. They called it Building 80, but what I understand for that father, that the kids in school
on the foot.
Right. Well,
have to make over the next couple of days, week, and to make a point.
Católica de la Comunicación.
I'll illustrate that over the next couple of days.
Anybody take responsibility for this? Any group take responsibility at this time? And what is the city doing to safeguard the citizens now that something like this happens?
That count when we play against other international teams.
Well, I have a problem. It's like this. I've just met a beautiful rhinoceros.
Why don't you run off and find Julie and Tom and get yourself out of the house for a while? Three's a crowd.
Take that long to get many generations of dogs without.
I fall. Then I'll be in complete control. We need your help to save Baby Red.
all three objectives. This has stood the test of time and has been...
You're on the case as forensic investigators look beyond the...
Well done. Stays 11 under with 1 to play.
And throughout the rest of the city, public transportation is normal. So the children should be able to return from school in the normal fashion, and it's been coming.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned you were on Barclay Street. What's the radius of damage that's been affected? How many other side streets around the world?
I don't think we know yet. The whole area of Lower Manhattan has been very much affected by it.
Fire are involved. Like how many? All NYPD off-duty officers as they come in, they're like
all NYPD and FDNY. Governor and the way in which the state reacted, we will have 1,600 National Guard to relieve them over a period of time.
Come from people in all walks of life, and most of the century's top inventions came from individuals, not companies. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention?
Or call, and then we can direct them to the right place.
The National Guard looting or anything like that? Any lawlessness there?
There have been no reports of lawlessness, no reports of looting, escape effort. They seem to be conducting themselves in a very, very sensible way, a very deliberate way. They seem to be helping each other. So we have...
Homicide area, they won't be patrolling the rest of Manhattan.
No, the purpose of it is to help with the relief effort. We're gonna need the help of the state, surrounding areas with heavy-duty equipment.
When will they be arriving?
National Guard troops, some have arrived, state police, by later this evening.
Mayor, bridges and tunnels will have to stay closed.
I think an update on what the plan will be for tomorrow.
We saw a lot of lightly injured people walking out of the area because obviously the emergency services were needed for the very seriously injured. People covered with dust, some people had difficulty breathing. Is there any health advice to give to people who were caught in the dust?
Well, obviously, if you feel ill or you feel that you've been affected by it, you should go to a hospital and get checked out. But if it's just discomfort that you feel, then get rid of the clothes and get to an area where you can breathe in fresh air.
How many people were in the World Trade Center at the time of this attack?
I mean, it was business had already started. It was right before 9 o'clock. I don't know.
Tens of thousands?
Yes. Approximately. Someone just gave me a number of approximately 10,000, but that's a guess.
How long will the city remain on a heightened state of alert?
Until we're told not to. I mean, right now the city is should be on a state of alert. Now that instead of frightening people, that should make people feel more confident that everything is being done to keep things secure.
But on other matters, Glaister was firm. Spirit became a frequent but unwelcome guest, sometimes visible and
Final flight. Does my lady find it interesting? Lady Marion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I asked if you found it interesting.
Yes, very.
Poor little orphan girl. You're trembling.
Kesselman to refute testimony of Secretary Donna Schumann. Back in early September 1986, Schumann told the court that her boss, George Folsey, and director John Landis joked about going to jail if authorities learned they were illegally using young kids on the set.
Just for you, Burger King has a cheese.
I think Jimmy might just, if you are nice to him, explain the rules to you.
At least on the outer ring. The Pentagon is saying that...
Jackson's tribute continued with the second show Monday at the Garden. His album Invincible is out October 30th. That's the news for now. For more on this and other stories, check in with MTVnews.com and stay tuned for more news at 10 to the hour here on MTV.
MTV News. You hear it first.
Reports Vice President Dick Cheney, a very experienced elected and appointed official, is in charge at the White House itself in a secure position below ground in the White House, we believe, and Condoleezza Rice, head of the National Security Council, while on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis, at some point it appears that they were very much, at least in partial charge. Let no one is in charge. He is the commander-in-chief, and whatever anybody thinks of him or doesn't think of him at the moment, he's the commander-in-chief. He's the leader of the nation. He is in Air Force One. He is in instantaneous communication when he wants to be any place in the world, and there should not be any misunderstanding about that. There'll be plenty of time later in the days and weeks to follow about whether he and his White House operation deported themselves as they could have and should have today. But as of this moment, no one should have any misunderstanding about the president being in charge.
Y hay muchas personas que están tratando de llamar a Nueva York desde California o de cualquier otra parte de la nación. Eso está...
And it goes to your uterus. So if you're pregnant, it quickly affects your fetus.
Literally, that's the way you want to play. Well, you know what's going to happen.
Saying that our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers.
Degrees under fair skies.
At the parking lots. Right now, it looks like most of the travelers that are headed to the airports have taken the precautionary measures and...
The latest on the situation in Washington for President Bush. As we know, he was in Florida this morning when this happened. He was flown then to a U.S. Air Force.
And moved up to regroup, reconstitute with the Navy leadership was exactly that, the rest of their lives. But it was heartening to see people going about executing their training.
It's the physiognomy.
Comes in the long run. That's why an individual gambler can strike it rich or go broke. But the house does a profitable business.
Because I won't
Duration. He lives in a community where every fifth...
lower down. But the first of the towers collapsed around 10 o'clock this morning. Not long after that, within 30 minutes or so, the second tower collapsed under its own weight. The structural damage too much for those steel columns to bear. Now, on a normal day, 50,000 people would be working in the World Trade Center. Perhaps as many as 10,000 more might be visiting or doing business there. We don't yet know how many of those people were able to escape before this conflagration rained down on them. Again, taking you just south of New York, this is the Pentagon. About 9:45.
In terms of the
Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. And management is the big issue. But as you listen to you two guys talk there for a second, you realize how this ripples out. Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, has just now ordered, actually a short while ago, has just ordered all civilian flights to cease over London. And so the impact of this one event, not only across the United States, but now being felt overseas, is constantly alive. And there are a couple of new pieces of information, too, about the flights in question that we have been so focused on today. In the case of American Flight 11, this was the one that first crashed into the trade towers this morning at 8:48, just a little before 9 o'clock this morning. ABC's Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us, now says that a flight attendant called from the plane to say that 2 flight attendants had been stabbed, and people on board the aircraft had broken into the flight deck, into where the captain and the co-pilot, and in the case of the 767, can't recall, they're not an engineer, but certainly broken into the cockpit, where the pilot and the co-pilot were located. 2 hostages, 2 flight attendants stabbed. And in the case of United Airlines Flight 737, which was the aircraft the United Airlines was crashed just near Pittsburgh, Lisa does confirm for us, our reporting of a little while ago, that a passenger did call from a cell phone on the phone to an emergency service, a 911 emergency service. They managed to do from the air to say that, in fact, they were in the process of being hijacked. And Ann Compton, one of our White House correspondents, calls just a short while ago to say that the president has landed again, this time at an Air Force base in Nebraska. And this suggests, A, that the Secret Service is still very much in charge of the president's movements at the moment, and that there is a very strong feeling in the highest reaches of government that the president should stay on the move. He's going to stay there, conceivably, for the next little while, because we've also been told by Ann that he's going to speak to the National Security Council this afternoon on a teleconference. The president going to stay abroad. I suppose you can do that from Air Force One as well. I'm not altogether sure. I think you probably can. But the president is going to talk to the National Security Council from somewhere other than Washington, and he is now in Nebraska. As I think Terry Moran, our White House correspondent, and others mentioned very early on in the day, it's a very delicate line for the president to follow. Stay on the move, lest there be any security threat to the president, and this will be absolutely decided by the national leadership of the Secret Service in conjunction with the National Security Council, while the political operatives in the president's entourage very much want him, we're told by Claire Shipman and others, to get him back to Washington to be in control in the place which is familiar to most Americans. And Mrs. Bush is, of course, we've already said, is at an undisclosed location, and Vice President Cheney, who carries an enormous load in this particular administration, is currently working out of the White House. John McCarthy, who covers the Pentagon, national security, and a good deal of terrorism and international intelligence issues for us, is at the Pentagon. John, what have you got?
A whole plate full of things, Peter. First of all, we've been talking throughout the day about possible ship movements, American ship movements. It is true that 2 aircraft carriers, 5 other combatants, and a hospital ship are now all heading north along the Atlantic seaboard toward New York. No decision has yet been made about exactly what to do with those ships when they get there, but of course aircraft carriers have a very large hospital capability, so they could be used for that. I think it is a responsive measure. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, after the attack on the Pentagon, went immediately to the gash that you see behind me here when the very first destruction was detected, and helped pull some people out of the rubble. He is now in what is called the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon, and he intends to stay there indefinitely until all forces around the world have been secured. All forces around the globe at this point are at ThreatCon Delta, which is the highest level of threat condition that American troops can be in. One of the difficulties with the fire and the rescue effort here in the Pentagon, Peter, is we have seen continuous outbreaks of fires within the different levels of the Pentagon, and it has been extremely difficult for search and rescue people to get inside the Pentagon. It was 5 hours before the first people were able to get into some of the rubble. to try to begin to pull out people who may have been trapped. The fire in the Pentagon was described as an inferno by those people who were in some of the worst areas. The evacuation in parts of the Pentagon was very orderly. Some of it was complete chaos, as you might expect.
Okay, John, thanks very much. John McCarthy at the Pentagon. We just take a quick look at John there. Jackie, you there for a second? I want to put John on camera for a second because earlier today you described, you just turn around and take a look at that gash in the Pentagon there and describe again for us. You think it's what, 200 feet wide, 200 to 300 feet wide?
It is at least 200 or 300 feet wide, Peter. Just imagine a very large commercial aircraft ramming into this space. The Pentagon is built like a blockhouse, as you know, during World War II. It is a very substantial building, and this aircraft, traveling at between 150 and 200 miles an hour, penetrated deeply into the rings of the Pentagon, almost to the center. The destruction on the 5 floors that are above ground is considerable. One of the admirals was briefing us earlier that he felt that the section that was hit was one of the areas that was being repaired. We now believe that is not true. It is an area that was very fully staffed, primarily with Navy and Marine Corps personnel, but also the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Okay, thanks very much, John McCarthy at the Pentagon. We'll come back to you. On the phone with us at the moment is the former CIA Director, James Woolsey. Mr. Woolsey, there's so much to ask you about at a moment like this in terms of your experience, but as our political director, or actually that's not true, as a former senior White House official said a short while ago to one of us, there's going to be a hellacious amount of finger-pointing at the moment. What's gone wrong here?
Well, one thing that's gone wrong, Peter, I think, is that for some years now, we have adopted a theory that terrorism first was likely just to be sort of a pickup team, these loose associations of terrorists inspired, say, by the Blind Sheikh in New York. This was the thought in the 2 bombings, one attempted, one real in New York back in the early 90s. And then the Clinton administration veered off into saying everything looked like it might be Osama bin Laden. It's important that we realize there is a real possibility when you have something this devastating and well coordinated that there could be state action of some sort behind it. Now, I don't know that that's the case, and I won't say that it's the case, but there is at least a plausible case that there was Iraqi government involvement in the World Trade Center bombing back in 1993. This all has to do with the identity, the true identity of Ramzi Youssef, who was the mastermind who's in prison out in Colorado now. At his sentencing, the judge said, we still don't really know who you are. And if there was a chance that there was Iraqi government involvement in that, since Youssef was the mastermind of the World Trade Center and of a bombing plot in the Pacific, which he was working on when he was caught to have a lot of American airlines in the Pacific blown up. What happened today is a sort of amalgam of the earlier 2 Ramzi Youssef plots. It's at least, I think, interesting that that's the case, and if some of the observers, Laurie Milroy and others, are correct, that there's a reasonable chance that he was, in fact, involved with the Iraqi government, there could also be a chance that the Iraqi government is involved here, even if bin Laden or other terrorist groups are as well.
Can I just ask you just a couple of really elementary questions about intelligence? You've just done something on the air which strikes me as what intelligence officers do when they sit down to try to figure out what the heck is going on. Is that in fact, what you're trying